Yeah, tonight, as Dennis already mentioned, we are going to have a debate, as we have new debate formats. Today we will talk mainly about editing, but before we start to talk about editing, I think we have to digest a little bit what we've seen, and therefore I would like to talk a little bit about your films, which would actually, although there haven't been in our class program, would fit both perfectly as well in the class program. And this isn't, I would start with your film, as your film has been first. As well, your film you made before, Brief Story of a Family, as well was a class story, I would say. So maybe you tell us a little bit more about how did you go there, or how did you reach there that you are again at this topic, at the class topic?
It's not it's by chance, actually.
Oh.
It's not no, it's because this short film was not part of the plan. Before I made my feature film, we had to postpone the shoot for a couple of months, waiting for an actor's schedule. And then I had this idea of the short based on, inspired by some news article that I read. And when I read the article, and I thought it was very interesting story, but in the article there wasn't the little girl. It was the wife and the husband. It's very, for me, I just feel this absurdity of that story, and I feel like I need to find a way to get the absurdity to work for me from my perspective. So I created the character of the little girl. And when we need to postpone the shoot for the feature, I said to my producer I wanted to maybe just, since I haven't done a short in a while, I thought just as a practice for the feature, I'll just do something for fun. And then we start doing this with a very small team. We shot in 3 days, but I was lucky enough to have this very, very good actor who played the driver. I mean, also the father. He's a really good actor on board. And then we start casting the little girl. I had written the script with these dialogues that in my head was very funny. But when I was doing the casting, all these girls who read the lines were just not funny at all. So I was like, I don't have a film if I don't have this girl. And then one day I was eating, and I was watching this girl and her tape, and she's just doing some introduction. She's saying her name. And then I was laughing, and my food is all over my screen. I was like, okay, I have my actor. So it was not part of the plan that I would make this film again about class. By the way, Brief History of a Family, it's more in the intention that it is about class. Like it's a working class kind of kid coming to a middle class family. Right. I was also here last year in Berlin, so it's my second time coming back. So it's so this one is by chance.
Yeah, maybe it happened to you as it happened to us, actually, while we were selecting films for the class program, that suddenly, and this happened as well last year with the climate topic, that suddenly we see everything through this topical glass. So in the end, you can really, maybe you can find in every film, you see suddenly something which refers to class, or last year to climate, or whatever. So maybe this is what happened as well to you as a filmmaker while you were preparing for Brief Story of a Family, that suddenly you end up with HIPPOPOTAMI as well, something.
In a way, maybe in a way, because I see this one also the difference in class between the family and then this old man. I have to make him more also. Well, this is partially based on the news article, but with the class difference, you immediately you see a clash. So I think it's natural that the dynamic comes and the drama and the conflict comes without for this one, without any, without a need to say too much, but you already see from the way they dress, the way they act, and the way they talk.
Yeah. So, but both films about family as well, and as the evening is called as well, family fatale. So I think for both films as well, I would say is family can be fatal for your life. So this as well refers to your film. So yeah, maybe you tell us a little bit about the development of this film.
Yeah,
you wrote the script together with Nick and Robinson.
Yeah, which he's right there in the back. Stand up, Niken. There we go. So Niken and I had worked on this film, The Sleeping Negro, that I made, and I have a whole bunch of projects I'm trying to make, and they tend to struggle trying to find financing. And I remember it was like towards the end of COVID, my grandmother passed away of dementia, and she had COVID at the time. And Niken's family had some health issues, and we were just kind of like talking on the phone. And I was going through a very depressing moment in my life, sitting in my kitchen in my house. And I was like, Niken, I got this idea for a movie, man. I want you to write it with me. And I pitched it to him. And so we just had like phone conversations back and forth where we would talk about our characters and the dialogue. So I think the script ended up being about 29 pages or something. And in the way that I make films, I don't have a luxury of making films over a long period of time. So I remember getting a grant from Panavision, and I was like, we're going to shoot this film in my house. That was my house in Colorado. And I took my wife and my kids. I put them in a hotel up like north, and I was like, hey, babe, they got like a pool, spa. And she gets there and she's like, what the fuck is this? She was like, this pool is horrible, it's disgusting. So I felt bad, and I had 25 people, part of my students, in my house, and we shot. And so I was freaking out because we had a 10-day shoot scheduled, and then FedEx lost 25 cases of camera gear from Panavision over a week. I drove to 3 different FedEx warehouses in the state of Colorado and slept in my car overnight trying to locate my Panavision cameras. And by the time I find out where they are and they get to my house, we have 5 days to shoot the movie and get the gear back to Los Angeles. So I was not in a good place mentally at all. And so the film it started off with this grief, and then it just kind of became something else, And we shot it fast, and then we edited
5 days.
5 days, and then I cut the movie in like 2 weeks.
Yeah, all right.
So that's kind of how that came about, and it was more of a desire to do something, but then like tap into this grief that he and I were both experiencing in our families, and just the frustration of COVID. It's like I was in Germany in Mannheim, Heidelberg during COVID, and no one was on the streets. You're walking around. It was pretty dead and soulless and lifeless.
Yeah, you can see it actually as well in the film. I mean, the film is very claustrophobic, and as well, I had at least constantly the sensation. I'm watching a CCTV. Yeah. How actually the camera is posed, and so I assume that was intentionally.
It was intentional. The only way to shoot on film is to either cut your production days and do a 1-to-1 shooting ratio. So we did 1 take for most of the stuff, except for the split screen stuff, which took a few takes, but most of it was 1 take, and then we would have to move on. Yeah.
Okay, from here we start. So this was HIPPOPOTAMI. It's the first film you edited as well yourself, as well as this film is the first film you edited yourself. So
feature, yes.
Feature film. So the short films you edited as well yourself?
The films and the short films in film school I had to edit.
Yeah.
But some of the short films I did not edit. This is the first time I've actually had to pull out those old editing skills from film school. Yeah.
And as this is the idea that we invited, first of all, editor. So Agnieszka Glińska is here. She's editor of numerous international films. I think you said more about 40 films you edited. And I think one of the latest ones is EU, you probably know, from Jerzy Skolimowski and...
The Girl with the Needle. The Girl with the Needle.
With the Girl with the Needle, yeah. And that among... These 40 and lamb, yeah, as well. So yeah, another animal film, yeah, we're talking about, and yeah, and we have here Ramon Zürcher, who edits as well his own films. So therefore, we thought, okay, today we are talking about editing, and we're talking about so what was it always the idea? So I would start with you, Ramon. Is it you already from the beginning? You always edited your own movies, and was this always a great desire, or was it like Skinner said that you made the first movies you edited yourself because of the film school, and then you suddenly thought it's something you would stay with, or is it the way how you as well your filmmaking process already starts in your head with both, with the script and editing, and then putting this into the film and the camera with your DOP, or how is your filmmaking process while you're already as well doing your own editing? Yeah.
I would say it's a little bit both options. Actually, I already started very young when I was interested in filmmaking. Then I didn't know that there are softwares, editing softwares, and I thought that there's the camera and you film the things, and then the shot has to be good, and then you film the next thing. And so with my twin brother, we made kind of a strange film called The Story of My Death. We were very young with ketchup blood and things like that. And that time we were maybe, I would say, 9-10 years old. And later then in school, then always when there was the opportunity to make something with video, we made video and we edited on iMovie. And so the editing process or the orchestrating of moving images was something which was familiar very early. Mm-hmm. And so actually also then later when I went to art school and when I made first performance videos or things like that, I always made storyboards, or I always wrote the actions, the dialogues, the stuff, but also thought the images. A little bit like Hitchcock said that actually when he starts shooting the film already exists in his head. Mm-hmm. And then it's just like there's a recipe and he brings the thought images to those moving images. And I guess that's why as software, editing software and editing images is something very familiar to me since the beginning. And as the films are already a little bit thought with storyboards, it's very natural for me to then edit, to make the editing after the tournage, after the film shoot.
So then, Agnieszka, when you work with so many different directors, you probably have as well as much different ways of working with them, as the directors are probably different personalities and they have different ways of working. So how do you approach, and I'm talking now about fictional film, because you are an editor for fictional and documentary films, so
it was like Communion, for example, which won EFA. But I don't edit usually documentaries, more like feature films, but I edited the Communion, which won EFA.
Yes, yeah.
Well.
Is this the only documentary?
No, few more, but this was like, like a recognizable title.
Yeah. Could you talk
yes,
closer?
Of course I can
then
talk.
I can hear you better, sorry.
Sorry.
But therefore the process for documentary and fictional editing is different. So let's stay with the fictional film maybe at the moment. Could you tell us a little bit about how the approach is when you have when you start to work with, for example, let's say with EO, especially? I mean,
I can say like generally, because it's like when I got this accepted this invitation here, I was like, what's going on here? It's like, am I set up? It's like the 3 directors who are edited their own films, and it's like, do you want to prove that the editor is not important and needed in the film? And the thing is that if about me, I'm like present on many stages. I'm present already during the script writing. I mean, I read the script and I already say, for example, that this scene is not needed, can be deleted, this doesn't work, or this is repetitive. So it's like it's a kind of helpful thing actually for the director to see.
When you already
it's
before the shooting.
Before the shooting, yes. So we're in the script. So it's like the different perspective, like from the all stages, meaning the script during the shooting and as well during editing, because I usually edit during the shooting, so I can see as well very quickly what's going on and what is needed, what can be shot, what doesn't work, what can be reshoot, for example, and as well for example, with the Girl with the Needle, the Magnus von Horn film, which is now on, I had this thought, for example, that when I saw one of little images for the nightmare, one of the scenes, I had this thought that maybe they should shoot this kind of thing and we put it at the very beginning of the film, because I had the feeling that the first scene for this film is not strong enough and would be something more interesting. So, I don't want to prove that editor is really important person and needed in the process of editing, but it's really good to have that different perspective, somebody who you can talk to. For example, I had sometimes the situation that I edited something and the director who wrote the script as well, and I was like, okay, I didn't expect that this can be this way, because of course the one person has one perspective. It's more like a subjective, not objective, obviously, and the vision. So that's why I feel that sometimes the editing is okay, we wrote it, shot, and it's just put together, and it's not true at all. So it's like a magical thing. It's totally manipulation thing. Actually, you can create whatever you want. You can make the character you like or you dislike, or you can hate, or you can be victim, or you can defend. It's you can do whatever you want. What your imagination actually gives you, and by changing the scenes, by deleting the scenes, by adding some ADRs as well during the editing and extending process, you can do whatever actually you want. And if you stuck to the script, because I don't have situation that there's the script and I have exactly the same what is an editing. So actually to see how important this editing is, when you read the script, you see the materials and you see the last cut, and it's nothing. It doesn't have anything to do with the what was in the script usually.
But it's probably happened as well that you just came in the state when the film was already shot, wasn't it?
Yeah, I had the situation like this. Yes, of course.
I mean, this is a completely different story, and so. Therefore, maybe it's more difficult as well to get into the editing when you're already in that state, or I mean, in general for you to work on it.
No, it's not difficult. And the difficult is, for example, when a director edits on the set. This is for me the most problematic situation, that when they say okay, we are shooting from this point to this point, and then from this point to this point, and then so I don't have any options. And I had now I don't want to move which example, but I have now project who, when I see materials, I'm please don't do this to me. We can decide in editing that we will use this long 3-minute shot, but please let's have options later.
Yeah.
Because then we stuck with one option.
Yeah.
And we don't have a possibility to change it. So let's just do it more, and then we just get stuck with the master shot. Not too long, because the funny thing is that when you shoot on the set, I noticed that it's so exciting. It's like beautiful long shot, it's working, but then when you have it in the film, it's like, shit, what I can do with this, I can jump cut maybe, but it's not the solution, so better to have the options and then change it during the editing.
So you would probably say that it could be helpful that directors know a little bit about editing, so they can actually as well follow a little bit more the ideas you can propose to them. I mean, not in all film schools you probably have to edit the films. I don't know. Would you share your experience?
As a professor,
as a
professor, usually the students edit their films out of a necessity. And to speak to class, if one lacks access to resources, then one has to do whatever they can do to get a film made. And I think sometimes that will make an influence in terms of how the post-production process goes, Yeah.
And from your experience now, JJ and Skinner, you edited these films, but would you prefer to have someone else editing the film in general, or is it something? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I hate editing.
Okay. No. Well,
not the art of editing. I hate editing my own films, but it was done out of a necessity.
Yeah.
Because I lacked the funds to hire an editor.
Yeah.
And so therefore I had to pre-edit the movie as we shot. Every single thing we shot, we used in the film, except for one B-roll shot that just didn't work. But there was no options. It was what it was.
Film, of course, is something different, no? I mean, when you shoot on film, then if you shoot digitally, then...
Well, if you shoot on film at the budgets that we're making films, yes, because it's a 1-to-1 shooting ratio.
But I think
if you have money and stuff, you can shoot, as much as you want. But for this film, it was basically... we didn't have any choices, and I didn't have enough money to hire someone, so I just did it myself.
All right.
Which I'm not saying is the best decision, but I didn't want to wait for like 2 or 3 years to make another movie. You know what I'm saying?
Ramon, so would you like to work with an editor, or would you prefer to do it on your own? So would you share your stand on that?
Actually, I would like to work with an editor. The last film we shot without options, without editing options. We just made mostly the masterings, the master shots, and then we had only very, very less possibilities. It was the concept, and it was also the risk. So we already noted in the scenario from where to where a shot will go. We overlapped it, so there was a little bit a handle or a creativity to then make and build the rhythm, but it was a risk for those 3 films. But I think it's like a very important moment in the post-production when there's not only the gaze of the director, who's also sometimes the writer and everything, but that there's the confrontation of different gazes, as you described, that there's also the possibility that the script and how it's shot and then the final cut or the picture lock situation, that those things can be different. And for projects in future, I'd like to share or to share that moment. But the last films, those 3 films, as I thought the films, as I had that storyboard in mind, I just really wanted to watch how it works as I thought it, and I wanted to watch it exactly like that. And the second film, the girl. The Girl and the Spider. There, an editor edited it during the shooting, but then at the end, I've watched it. It worked, but I wanted to look kid how it would have been as I thought it, and I wanted to watch every take. It's a little bit, yeah. It was just like that, and so.
No, it's great because even nobody want to watch it. Usually after a shooting, it's like they're so fed up and tired of shooting this that they don't want to watch material. So it's great.
I think it's interesting to watch really every take, because sometimes then you take just the voice of one take, but then you combine it with the image. Or sometimes, because I like After Effects and 2D animations, and sometimes there's like a wisher, I don't know the English word. There are just things like, I don't know, just little things which you can cut out and put to the other take, because we shot it with a static camera, so you could combine things from different takes. And I think in every take there are gifts or there are little beautiful things, and just find the richness of each take and combine the most beautiful dialogues, the most beautiful voices. And that's why I just like to watch everything.
Yeah, I think also too, it's not black and white, right? I mean, I think we have to talk about what is the criteria for a standard filmmaking process. Ideally, I would have a massive crew, lots of money. I had an editor for the first feature and it was awesome. But I think, it depends on if one wants to wait for a long time to raise the money to make a film, or you work with what you have. And especially for Black American filmmakers in America, there's a gatekeeping of resources, not only from the industry, but from the Black bourgeois class. And so in order to make a film, you can either wait around for permission or you can greenlight yourself. And sometimes when you greenlight yourself, you have to work with the scraps that you're given. And that will determine the aesthetic outcome of the film. And therefore, in order to shoot sometimes with these low-ass budgets, you have to have a crew of 8 or 9 people, and post-production takes a hit. If you're a filmmaker who doesn't understand editing, you're screwed. But if you have a little bit of editing experience, you could probably get away with editing your own film. The only way I could do it was because I didn't have choices. If I had choices, I could not edit this movie because I'm not a skilled editor. All I had was the shot, and that was it. And I knew that this shot came after this shot and this shot, and that was easy for me. Now, that either works or it doesn't. And for a lot of people, it won't work. And some people may say it didn't work in my experience. But instead of waiting for the money, I personally chose to use the skills that I developed over time and use the resources I had access to, Now, when we're talking about feature films, when we're hiring an editor, we're talking about budgets probably in the millions, $500,000 at least. We're not talking about, a movie that costs $30,000 shot on film. You know what I'm saying? So I think there needs to be like a criteria defined in terms of when one has the ability to hire. Because the same thing goes with other positions. You know what I'm saying? I know this is about editing, but it's like some people have to shoot their own movie, direct, act in, write, just to get that art expressed. And it's all about access to resources. And that deals with class, and that deals with, what you're born in, and the people and the networks and the connections, and what we deem is good art versus bad art. I mean, these are all subjective things that we have to include into the discussion.
Actually, I never edited a film by myself alone. So I had two short films I edited with another editor. For this one in particular, it's because I had an editor with me in the beginning. She started doing the editing and she did a few passes, and I think the story was coming together. But for me, she got busy a little bit later on with the feature, so I took over. And for me, what I brought to the table is the comedy part, because I feel like she was good with constructing the story and everything. But I think these little moments in the comedy in their performance. I think this is something that I look at all the takes, and I feel like, yeah, I mean, there are moments I can change. There's stuff I can just do a little bit of tweaking here and there, and I think that in a way it's collaboration becomes, even though, yeah, and then I would send her the stuff and be like, okay, take a look at this, you know. And I think with my feature film, it's again a collaboration. I mean, I didn't edit my feature film, but I had a very long discussion with my editor, who is very experienced, a Danish editor. But when he sent me the first cut, I didn't have any, I mean, I didn't give him any, I let him do whatever he wants with the first cut. And when he sent me the cut, well, I sent him like a 5-page notes, and I'm pretty sure he's hating me at that point. But I told him on the call, I said it's more about like we're finding a direction, we're defining like a language of how to work on this thing. So I sent him a few samples of, okay, maybe this is how I want the pacing to go, and take a look at it and see if it works for you. And then he took it very like nicely, and he's like, yeah, let me try things. And then for the second pass, it was very already it's in the right path. And later on, I flew to Denmark and to work with him in his room. And because I trust him at that point, I trust him. He would be guiding the story. He would be grounded in the character, in the emotion, in the story. So I can be the crazy one. I can be next to him, be editing a scene, and be trying crazy things, and be like, does it work for you? And sometimes he'll be like, yeah, this is great. Sometimes he'll be like, this is maybe too much. But because I trust his sense, like he's very grounded, then I can be the one who's doing. Sometimes, you know, like you say, you can try something, I'll put it in the beginning, or try something a little bit like, oh, this doesn't work. But if you kind of mix it up. So in my mind, I kind of pretend this is not my film. You know, I'm editing someone else's film because I trust my editor.
But do you work in preparation for your film as Ramon does, as well with storyboards? Do you prepare at least your feature film? Did you prepare it as well as?
Yeah, I prepare as much as possible, but I always in the editing process, I always be like, I forget whatever I prepare. I just because, you know, when you shoot a film, it's already very different from what's in your head. So I try to keep the process open, and I think if even also for this short film, but this short film is a bit closer to what I had in mind, because everything's static, and we have really also not a lot of options because we had to shoot in 3 days. We have a lot of locations, but for feature, it's already quite different from on the page. And also I think thankfully, you know, it's thanks to I had an open mind when I edited, so I treat it as someone else's film. So I had a lot of discovery in the editing process. There are some sequences that I would never have thought of in the writing process.
You started just editing after shooting, completely after shooting as well?
No, there was an editor on set, but it's not my editor of the film. We had an editor on set just to make sure we are not like missing any important things. I'm
asking this so I've tried to pinpoint it out so much, and as well you're talking about a Danish editor, because I was working for a short time for the Association for Editors here in Germany, and there was a very big discussion as well about whether editing is part of the production or part of the post-production process. And of course, most of the editors I was talking to, they said they think it should be part as well, and as well with the financing and all the situation, it should be part of the production process, and it would be as well a lot better outcome if editors would be involved already right at the beginning. And we had a guest there, which was actually a Danish guest, because in Denmark they do it like that. They actually editing is part already of the production process right from the beginning, and especially they give a lot of time to documentary editing. So they have not like in Germany, they have not like 6 weeks, but they have something more that 6 months, something like that already, and they have these programs.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you what you said, and also what she said. Like it's earlier the better. You know, if I knew my my editor would be on board on the script stage, I will send him the script just to see what he thinks. It's a different perspective.
I will open up soon to the audience because I was seeing someone I know who was actually nodding his head when I said this. So maybe there are already some questions in the audience, maybe from filmmakers, I know. No. So we go ahead.
Yes. Oh,
yeah.
Well, thank you for your 2 films and for this conversation. I have a question. JD already started talking about it a little bit, but maybe it's also to Agnieszka. How is it to work with directors who edit a lot and maybe kind of, work on your edit themselves, and then kind of, is it productive or are you annoyed? And maybe to the other filmmakers, how do you think you are, or how are you when you work with an editor? Do you think you would be a pain in the neck, or would you, be open to a dialogue? Because, it's a different mode.
Cameron, let's be honest, it's director's film. It's not that, that we, edit films and it's ours. And it's like, it's we add something from, from ourselves. So we add our sensitivity, emotions, and create. But we always, it's cooperation. It's for me, it's the director's film anyway. So if he wants to change it and do his way, okay, I can of course fight. I can try to convince that that maybe not, but at the end of the day, it's his film. So it's not like it's my way or highway, as we say. So so this is the most important thing. But in the dialogue, definitely can be created something special, because if you have one way, it's. But if you see the different, I recently spoke to a woman who is made a debut film, and she's the editor. She works as the editor, and I asked her if she edited her film. And she's like, "No, come on, how? How could I talk to who I would talk to? I would talk to myself. No, I need somebody to discuss and to change perspective, and as well to see to make it better. That's it. But answering the question, it's director, so this do the way how he or she wants.
I do want to say that. I have an editor that I work with usually, but when I can pay her, because I don't allow people to work with me for free. And when I made this film, I knew I could not pay what she was worth, and I knew I shot it in a way that I could probably edit it myself. But I did show her a few cuts because she was interested. She was like, "Let me see this thing that you're working on," and she was very gracious. Because we're friends before we became, artists, working partners. She gave me some feedback and some ideas that I was able to incorporate. So I did lean on her, and I definitely hold her opinion really high, right? But because I couldn't pay her, I wasn't gonna be like, "Hey, Sharon, why don't you cut this for credit and mill and copy?" And I lean on other people in the community for feedback. So I don't feel like I'm in the dark by myself. I do feel like there's a support group. But the technical aspects of the cut and the fade and all that, I just had to do it because I couldn't afford to pay anybody, right?
You still,
Well, actually, the perfect thing would be to work with somebody. The most perfect thing when somebody already reads the script to look, that is, as you said, that would be like the dream. That's perfect. But I think during editing, I had, as I said, the second film, there was the editor and me. And then it felt sometimes strange to be there and watching. and then using words to describe what I'd like to see, to put that sound there and to take some frames there and more frames there. It's so technically then, but actually editing can be like painting with sounds. It's like audiovisual painting, and when you paint, then you don't speak, you just make things and look how it works very intuitively. And that moment of sitting in front of the computer and just trial and error, that's something which I like, because then sitting there and using words to describe is something when it's like 2 months, then it makes me, I don't know. So I always need then some weeks where I'm just in front of the computer and I paint on audiovisually, and then some weeks where we are together in front of the computer. But those moments of painting with moving images and sounds is something which I need to feel the movie and to just try things.
Maybe you find one day the perfect
Maybe
match.
Agnieszka.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it is easier for you as well.
It depends, first of all, like, on the people, on the energy, right? It's typical, It's not like, of course, you can have the greatest editor, but you don't agree because you don't feel the same way. And this is the very important. Of course, you can have different perspective, but you have to feel and be sensitive the same way. Otherwise, it's the conflict, right? And it's pointless, so you can just do it yourself and, forget about editor, right?
There are some more questions. Oh, yeah. Yep.
Wait to see.
Yeah. Are there any questions? Till.
Yeah, hi. I'm trying, I think I have 2 questions in my mind, and I try to connect them with each other. Because first I wanted to ask a question that was more maybe about the Skinner Myers film, and maybe also how it connects maybe to topics also of Ramon, your films, in terms of like family, and how you actually, I think, take very seriously the trope of the family conflict and take it to like maybe certain sites where it usually is not present. And then I also thought about connecting that to editing. Like editing is not only like, you talked a lot about it as a very specific practice, but how you connect images with each other is of course also almost like a philosophical like question of like how images relate to each other. If you talk about like continuity editing as like maybe like a default way of thinking about editing, and then maybe also like the films that talk about family conflict but are still invested in the continuity of the family or something like that. Yeah. And then your film, I think, does something else, like take something more seriously, the actual existential nature of something like a family conflict or a dysfunctional family. And yeah, I was just like, this was in my mind in terms of like editing choices also as a way of expressing the things you want to express in a film. If that makes sense.
I'm going to keep harping on this point, but I think so like I went to the USC film school for a year and I dropped out. And at USC, they were very big on teaching us how to work with the big crews, the editors and production designers and whatnot. And that is awesome if you have the budget for that. But for me, I had this burning desire to make a film, and I didn't have enough money to make it equitable to pay people, like if I had a big crew. I did not want to edit this film, but I knew that if I had a support group, they would help me. And I think also, too, it's like you have to look at one's worldview or political belief in terms of how society should operate. And for me, it's like I want to make films in a way where how I think the world should operate. So it's like we don't work more than 8 hours. We eat very well. make sure the food is really tasty. And we make sure that everyone gets paid, not just a living wage, but like a really good wage. And if the sacrifice has to happen, it happens with me, because I'm the one that wanted to make this project, no one else, right? And so there are people in my life that I lean on for editing influence, but at the end of the day, I wish I had enough access to resources to hire the editor, the production designer, right? This is why I had to act in the films. Not out of a selfish desire, but because I couldn't afford to pay another actor to play that role. And I used to be an actor, trained in New York City. So I did it. And so I think that's, for me, that's what influences the films that I make, because I don't have access to millions of dollars. And I think that has to be part of the discussion, like I said earlier. Because when we talk about editing, it's almost like this industry standard of like everyone has a budget and they can hire everybody. But then we have to look at who has access to what resources, I think is something that is missing from not our conversation, but just I'm talking like conversation in general. And that's why, unfortunately, I had to edit the film. But in addition to editing, you limit the shots you can take because you have to pre-edit the film. Out of necessity. And that's a gamble. That's a risk, because that doesn't always work. And I've had films where that did not work. And you will never see those films, ever. I don't know if that answered your question, Till, but that's
maybe
what was inspired by what you
maybe
said.
I pick up Till's idea about editing as well, and connecting it with family. I mean, I was thinking more about, especially with maybe telling narratives about family narratives. Editing is sort of putting sort of scenes like memory together. Maybe is memory something to do with editing? That's a question.
That's it. That's. And I don't want to harp on this mic. So if anyone wants to talk, please. I know, like at least in like the African oral storytelling tradition, memory is very important. And when in America, when blacks were slaves, they were pulled from a lot of different tribes across the continent of Africa. And one of the ways that they were able to communicate were through these oral storytelling traditions, even if they spoke different dialects. You see that in jazz and blues, which is black music originally, right? And so you find that in storytelling when it comes to family tales, at least in the black experience. In America, I should say, because you do have, blacks who immigrate to America whose ancestry did not go through that slavery. But oral storytelling traditions is a foundation of the art in America for Black Americans and how they express themselves. And that is something that is just innate in us subconsciously. But that is one thing that allowed the slaves to deal with all the shit they had to deal with, was this communal or storytelling traditions with the hope that things will get better based on what has happened in the past and our connection as a community. And I think that does bleed into, if you're tapped into that does bleed into your decisions on how you tell stories about family and editing and all that stuff, But that's a very specific thing to a very specific culture, to a specific country. So it's not a global thing. I'll make that clear, if that makes sense.
Would you agree, or any opinions?
I mean, no one has
that?
to agree with me at all. This is my opinion.
I would agree, yeah. But
you talk about slavery and people get really quiet, right? And that's okay. But to be a African American, a Black American, is to be a product of rape. Because if you are African American, like for example, I'm 25% European. We were probably related to some of you all in here. My family originated from Wales in the 1600s, but that family owned my African side of my ancestry in the 17 and 1800s. So I am connected to Wales as much as I'm connected to Africa. And in here and subconsciously, those traumas and those stories influence the ideas that come out of the film, the stories that I want to make as films, right? And go ahead.
But I would say this is in general like that. Just the way how it works is differently. But I think we all have our memories is influenced by our past and our ancestors and whatever. So that's why I asked, would you agree? Or maybe I misunderstood. So.
No, I totally hear that and agree. I personally think that the chattel, I will say chattel slavery that existed in America was a very specific type of slavery and degradation that, thank God, is over and has not existed and did not exist before that. Yes, there was slavery in the world. I understand that. But the way that America was created on genocide and slavery is very specific to the functioning of my country. And so there are memories in that subconsciously through our ancestry, I think that comes out in the storytelling, desires of those Black Americans who want to tell authentic stories. I'm not talking about Hollywood. I'm not talking about assimilation. I'm not talking about trying to make money off film. I'm saying like people who really want to tell authentic stories, you tap into that, and that's real. And that's an experience that, hey, we all have our own ancestral experiences.
So I thought I was actually probably more thinking it more in a more technical way than a specific.
I see.
So yeah.
But everyone take a breath. It's okay.
Any questions or any comments from?
Well, maybe that family topic, something which would interest me, because memory, we spoke about memory, and in the film there are those VGA at the very end where Malik and Tristan are playing or making sport together. It's kind of a memory. And also, so at those memory in the past and in the present, there was a father, Tristan and Malik. And I'm just interested in that family building, family structure, where those three characters and the house itself are important, where the mother is, or what is it important for the story? Or
from a realistic perspective, when we came up with the idea later after the script was written, we were like, oh, it'd be great to have some home video footage of us as kids. Obviously, Niken and I did not grow up together, so we didn't have that. But Niken has a brother who's 4 years younger, and he had the footage. I'm the oldest of 6, and we grew up extremely poor, so we could not afford a video camera in the 80s. So there was no video footage of me personally, but Niken had it. And so we used that after the fact to try to show how the brothers at one point were very loving, and how you go through life, things happen, and it can destroy your relationship with your siblings or your family. And then the extra thing that maybe did not come through in the movie is that for Black families in America, the chances of you having a unit that's together over multiple generations is very small. And because of systematic institutions, racism, white supremacy, and all that, Black families always have to fight against their families falling apart, in addition to finding jobs and dealing with microaggressions and all that stuff. So that was some of the things that he and I talked about when we put the movie together. And the fact that he didn't have any footage of his mom. I mean, she's still alive, thank God. But he didn't have any footage of his mom because I think she was the one filming. And so I said, well, in order for this to work for the story, it just has to be the two brothers and the dad. And that's just kind of like how it happened. You know, but she was always there, but she was behind the camera. So he didn't have any footage of his mother, you know.
Yeah, as well. And I mean, this follows actually throughout the film. It seems to be like in your film that some sort of ghost is as well handling your
yeah.
So Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always dreaming about death and ancestors and stuff like that. And I think as we were writing this piece, I was like, yo, it'd be cool if Dad came back as a ghost and then just told us to do something really absurd. I had a buddy of mine who died of cancer at 47, and I remember, I was with him as he took his last breaths, and we sat with his body, him and his wife, myself, my wife, we sat with his body for like 4 hours. And then the coroners came and took his body, and his wife cremated him, and his wish was for me to go to New York City on George Washington Bridge and spread his ashes. So I remember it's like 10 degrees Fahrenheit. It's freezing cold. And me and all these people were walking across the Washington Bridge, and I have his urn, I have these ashes. And I'm like, all right, it's kind of illegal for me to do this, but I'm going to do it anyways. And I go to dump his ashes into the river, and the wind blows right when I pour the ashes out, and they all go right into my mouth. And I was like, oh, okay, that was one last little joke for my buddy. Okay. And so that's where that idea came of like having the dad come back as a ghost, because I imagined my buddy as a ghost playing that trick on me, because that's something he would have done, And then the films of like a pitch upon who's the what's the film that he made?
Uncle Bonmont.
Huh?
Uncle Bonmont.
Yes, Uncle Boomy. I love that film, and I was like, this could be an homage to him too if I throw a little like ghosts in there. And I had actually reached out to him because he's connected to the university I work at. And I said, yo, you want to executive produce this movie? And he was like, no. He was like, I'm too busy. I said, okay, cool. And so he was an influence. So was Saimi Leong and so Lav Diaz and Bellatar and these guys who I look up to as filmmakers,
There's a question from Lucia.
Hi everyone, thank you for your films and your talk. This is an obvious question, but Agnieszka, could you talk about what you think about the editing of these films? And
very good.
No. It's difficult in the moment when the film is ready and it's like almost in distribution, and it's like this one of the most like irritating things, But if I'm to be honest, great job, and I would edit this film. I mean that for me it's like rough cut, and it needs like a lot of work, but not like long work, but it's like usually when you use like long shots, it's good to break it. When you try to do everything in the continuity, it starts to be boring, unfortunately. So to break it, when you know the geography of the for example, house, you don't need to show that. We call it like in Poland like handle editing, from the handle to handle. It's like you open the door, walk, close the door, and like you don't have to. The character can be in the middle of the scene already. You can cut like it's like, for example, he said that I don't hike. Then you can cut on this or on the face, on your face, and then it will be stronger than letting him leave and actually lose the energy of the whole scene. And this is the problem, that everything what is not important and it's like pointless, as we say, like the beginnings or the ending, they can be cut out and will be much, much stronger. It's not about that this film is too long, it's about that why to keep so long if you don't have anything there,
Yeah, I think
so. This is the problem, that you don't want to like make the viewer being tired.
Absolutely.
This is a convention as well. No?
Well, I mean, listen, anything that we're talking about, I never take personally, and I thank you for being honest. Although I disagree. In my PhD dissertation that I'm doing at the University of Amsterdam, my goal is to try to create a film theory that creates an ontological new Black cinematic language. Now, with theory doesn't always work, but you have to apply that theory to films to see what works and what doesn't. As people, we are conditioned to see cinema in a certain way. We just are. And when you, and it's not to say that I can't make things that are bad and things that are not going to work. It's an experiment. It's in a lab. But we are conditioned. Haile Gerima talks about in the triangular cinema theory that, the critic, the spectator, and the filmmaker, these three entities need to be on the same speaking level in order to figure out what is moving, how art and film is moving society forward. He was speaking towards the black condition as an Ethiopian filmmaker who came here in the LA Rebellion in the 60s. So for me personally, my goal is to experiment to break the norms of what is considered cinema. And that's not going to be for everybody, probably for most people, not at all. Because the goal is not to make money. The goal is not to find distribution. The goal is to take the theory and apply it and see what works and what doesn't, and then come up with, okay, maybe this is a way that we can move black cinema forward that doesn't adhere to a Western Hollywood Eurocentric ideal of what cinema is. And so these are things that I'm playing with. And for, traditional views of cinema, this movie is not going to work for a lot of people. And so that's the attempt in making the films that I make. And the next movie that I shoot in 5 weeks, that we're going to shoot in 4 days, it's going to, if people did not like this film, that's fine. You don't have to like it. It's going to frustrate the hell out of those people because we're going to try something else. From an editing, dialogue, writing perspective. This is why the scripts we write are no more than 35 pages. Because that whole bullshit of 1 minute per page, that's not our goal. Our goal is to break up what cinema is and can be for the black community as it leads to, as a tool of liberation for the black struggle in America. I'll say that in America because I don't really know what's going on here in Germany for black people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking as well that it's a way how we are trained actually to watch films. I would say a special way of editing as well, like continuity. Sorry, I have to. Sorry, yeah.
I actually, because when I was at film school, I disliked my editing teacher because she does a lot of TV and I don't like what she did. So what I did was for all the exercises, I shot in one take. So she would have nothing to suggest. But in that way, what I learned was that you can try to. Just because it's one take, it doesn't mean it has to be boring, Like, I feel like you can find ways to edit in the scene, adjust the tempo in the scene. That's why
like internal editing, right?
Yeah. That's why you do like 100 takes. Just because it's one take doesn't mean it's easy. You do 100 takes just to fine tune the details, fine tune the choreography. So yeah, if the problem is about just doing the long take, I think it's of course you have also the liberty to experiment within that scene and to make it.
Absolutely. I will say this, and then I'm going to have to excuse myself to use the restroom, if that's okay with everyone. Huh? Plastic. I don't have a plastic bag. Yes, good. I will say this. I remember. So my buddy Marari Garima, his father's Haile Gerima, who's part of the LA Rebellion. He made Sankofa and Bush Mama and these films, if you know. Him and Charles Burnett and Shirkina Aina and Billy Woodbury went to UCLA in the 60s. They were recruited because Teshom Gabriel, who was a Ethiopian film scholar, was trying to get more black people into LA and America to make these films. And in Bush Mama, which was his first feature out of film school, you see him get arrested with his film camera. And that was because LAPD was like, what are you doing, black dude, with a camera in Compton? And they arrested him. He put that in the film. And you look at these films and, compared to our standards today, you would say they're rough around the edges. But at the time, they were working with the resources they had, and they were making films that spoke to the Black community. And so there's this desire to rewire and recondition. There's a great movie called Chameleon Street by Wendell B. Harris. It won the Sundance Grand Jury Prize in 1996. Steven Soderbergh voted for it, supported it. Wendell B. Harris went on to meet Will Smith. Warner Brothers was going to remake Chameleon Street. If you have not seen it, go watch this movie. It's something that once he got blacklisted because he refused to change his vision, and the whole process that he went through showed that, hey, you can be like his parents took loans out from their jobs, $1.5 million budget. He never made his money back. He is 70 years old. I talk to him all the time. He's never made another film after that because he wouldn't capitulate. But that film, you watch it, it's not perfect in the sense of like Western aesthetic, but it's a really powerful film that to this day holds its weight in terms of what the goals were. And I think when we're talking about cinema, we have to think about the POV, the gaze. And for non-white people, we work with what we have. I deal with this with my students. When I show them Black films that are not polished, they go, that was out of focus, that wasn't polished. Okay, what do you want them to do? They made that movie for 10 grand. That's what they had to work with in order to participate in the art of cinema. Therefore, there is a gatekeeping right there. So we have to really check how we are conditioned to view cinema. Personal opinion, but that is part of the dissertation that I'm working on as it pertains to the Black community. And none of this is ever personal or anything, but this is a debate, right? This is why we're here. And so I think that it's something that we have to keep in mind when we watch films. You know, obviously everything is subjective. We all have our personal choices, but we have to think about the resources that one has access to and the community that one comes from and the background that person comes from determines the cinema that they make. And right now, at least in America, there is not room for any of that discussion at all.
Well, maybe we continue this debate
at the bar. Let's go drink. Yeah. Who wants a shot? I gotta take a piss. Thank you so much.
We can take the bourbon as well. So,
awesome.
Thank you very much for being here.
Yes.
See you on one of the next evenings.